And John McDonnell, who writes for us here on Flow News 24, his article today, The US Plays Big Brother on Australia's Trade Relations with China. He talks about the virtual meeting between the Quad group of leaders, which happened last weekend. We commented on that meeting occurring as Scott Morrison and Joe Biden had their first real sit-down discussion about where their policy, particularly foreign policy, was heading in relation to China, and that the US would not relax its sanctions on China and it would continue its commitment to Australia, confirmed by the Deputy Secretary of State for the Asia Pacific, Dr. Kurt Campbell, in an interview with Nine Media's Peter Houcher. And Dr. Campbell said, "We have made it clear to China that the US is not prepared to improve relations in a bilateral and separate context at the same time that a close and dear ally, that is Australia, is being subjected to a form of economic coercion." Dr. Campbell confirmed President Biden's commitment to Mr. Morrison, where he said that the President was very direct with the Prime Minister Morrison, that we stood together on this. And so we've indicated both to Australia and China that at the highest levels we are fully aware of what's going on and we are not prepared to take substantial steps to improve relations until those policies are addressed and a more normal interplay between Canberra and Beijing is established, said the United States. And this is a pretty strong language in this type of context. As Houcher commented, it is the first known intervention of any nation to take substantive steps in support of Australia in its confrontation with Beijing. The regime of President Xi Jinping has applied trade bans and tariffs on at least $20 billion worth of Australian exports to China. And the question is that will the Chinese take this seriously? On the weekend, a senior Chinese official tweeted, "It seems America first has been replaced by Australia first." And the Chinese response to the Biden tough guy approach was summed up by the Chinese government's mouthpieces, the Global Times and the Frontier Post, that said, "I believe China and the US had a really good quarrel during their Alaska talks on Friday." Yes, there is plenty to be said about the United States under Biden now having a substantive position on China and having it in relation to protection of the long alliance that it has had with Australia, which is very good news in the context of our beliefs and our values and so forth. It is in the context too where the UK and EU have imposed their first joint anti-China sanctions since Tiananmen Square, the first time since 1989. And that has seen Australian Labor and Liberal MPs that have criticised China on the human rights treatment in Western China to the Uyghur minority. And this is very much the backdrop of where an article we put together last week where China criticised Australia on human rights over our detention centres. And these are statements of intent by China. And as many have editorialised and over the time, it is like the pot calling the kettle black in the number of people we're talking, in the type of places where people are housed, the type of treatment and their access to the human rights that those in detention centres that Australia have put in Pacific Islands are much different than what's happening in the western part of China. And that's the context of the story that we posted last week. China demands that Australia close its detention centres. You can have a look at John McDonnell's current story that he's posted, which includes the details of those sanctions and also the details of trade relations where the United States has said it will back Australia conclusively. That article, US Plays Big Brother on Australia's Trade Relations with China. That's worth reading at flownews24.com.au.